Some houses feel empty when you walk in. Borley Rectory felt crowded, even when no one was there. Welcome to True Haunt Lore. Tonight, we're going to Essex, England, to a red brick Gothic mansion. Built in 1862 for Reverend Henry Bull, it stood beside a lonely churchyard with narrow windows, black halls, and rooms that never seemed to warm. The haunting began with footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps pacing the upstairs corridor after midnight. The Bull children heard them outside their bedrooms. But when the door opened, no one was there. Just cold air, and the feeling that something had stepped out of sight. Then, in the summer of 1900, 4 of Bull's daughters saw the figure that would define the legend. At dusk, near the trees, a woman in black stood on the path. She wore the robes of a nun. Her head was bowed. Her hands were folded. She moved along the hedge line, not walking exactly, drifting. One of the girls called out. The nun stopped, turned slightly, and vanished. After that, servants, visitors, and villagers all reported the same dark, sorrowful figure on what became known as the Nun's Walk. The old story said a monk and a nun had tried to run away together. They were caught. The monk was executed. The nun was sealed alive inside a wall. Maybe folklore. Maybe gossip. But at Borley, old stories had a way of becoming footsteps. In 1928, Reverend Guy Smith and his wife, Mabel, moved in hoping for a quiet life. They found a skull instead. Mabel discovered it in the library cupboard, wrapped in decaying brown paper. The Smiths buried it in the churchyard, hoping that would calm the house. It didn't. The servant bells rang by themselves, even though the wires had been cut for years. Reverend Smith heard his name whispered from empty corridors, and Mabel woke with an invisible weight pressing on her chest, unable to move, while something unseen leaned over her in the dark. That brought Harry Price, the famous paranormal investigator, to Borley in 1929. He arrived expecting fraud, nerves, or a noisy old house. The rectory answered fast. A stone flew from the roof and landed near his feet. Then a kitchen window shattered outward, as if hit by an invisible fist. That night, in the Blue Room, Price sat with the Smiths by candlelight. The room turned ice cold. Their breath hung in the air. Then the knocks began. Slow, heavy, intelligent. Something was answering from inside the floor. The Smiths fled soon after. But the next family suffered worse. In 1930, Reverend Lionel Foister moved in with his wife, Mary Ann, and their young daughter. Whatever haunted Borley seemed to fix on Mary Ann immediately. Stones, bottles, and bricks flew through rooms. Objects vanished from locked drawers and reappeared in rafters, cellars, and sealed spaces. Mary Ann's bed shook violently at night. More than once, she said an unseen force lifted her and threw her to the floor. Then the walls began to write. Pencil messages appeared across the wallpaper in a shaky, childlike hand. Mary Ann, please help get out. Light. Mass. Prayers. They painted over the words. New ones appeared within hours. Sometimes they heard it first. The slow scratching of a pencil moving across plaster in an empty room. Imagine standing in a dark hallway, holding a lamp, hearing something invisible write your name. Lionel kept a diary. Over 5 years, he recorded more than 2,000 incidents. Then the Foisters left too. In 1937, Harry Price leased the empty rectory for a full investigation. Volunteers sealed doors and windows, logged temperatures, and spread powder on the floors to catch footprints. And still, the house performed. Rooms dropped below freezing in seconds. Footsteps dragged up the stairs and stopped outside sealed rooms. Lavender perfume filled the air, then vanished. Lights glowed in windows of a house with no electricity. In the Blue Room, one observer heard whispering in the corner, like a prayer spoken by someone with no body left. Then came the seance. A voice claimed to be a murdered nun. She said her bones were buried beneath the house. Then another presence came through, colder, darker. It called itself Sunex Amures, and it made a prophecy. The rectory would burn. The fire would begin in the library. And after the flames cleared the house, the bones would be found. Most people dismissed it, until February 27, 1939. That night, Captain W.H. Gregson was working in the library by oil lamp. The lamp fell. Burning oil spread across the floorboards. Within minutes, the library was an inferno. By the time firefighters arrived, Borley Rectory was being swallowed whole. Villagers watched from the lane as the most haunted house in England burned into the night. And through the flames, several witnesses said they saw her. A nun, standing motionless in an upstairs window. She didn't scream. She didn't move. She just stood there, head bowed, surrounded by fire, as if watching the prison that held her finally collapse. By morning, Borley Rectory was a blackened shell, but the prophecy had one piece left. In 1943, Harry Price returned and dug beneath the cellar area. In the dirt, workers found fragments of a skull and bones believed to belong to a young woman. Skeptics later called the whole case a hoax. Maybe some of it was exaggerated, but that still leaves the footsteps heard long before Price arrived. The nuns seen before Marianne was born. The bells, the whispers, the writing on the walls, the fire, and the bones beneath the ruins. Today, Borley Rectory is gone, but the ground remains. People still speak of cold spots near the old churchyard, footsteps where no one is walking, and the sweet smell of lavender drifting on the wind. And at dusk, along the old line of trees, some say a woman in black still walks alone, head bowed, hands folded, still searching. This is true haunt lore, and some houses don't need walls to stay haunted. So, after unpacking the pure, unrelenting terror we just explored, the phantom nun on the Nun's Walk, the wall writings pleading for help, and the prophetic fire that finally swallowed the mansion whole, you're probably wondering, what exactly is the vibe at the Borley Rectory site today? Well, my personal take on this infamous English location right now is all about its deeply deceptive, solemn charm. If you travel to the quiet village of Borley today, expecting to find a dark, rotting, Hollywood-style Gothic mansion, you will be completely caught off guard. During the daylight hours, the site where the rectory once stood actually possesses a remarkably serene and peaceful aesthetic. Surrounded by lush trees, rolling green fields, and the adjacent lonely churchyard, it feels surprisingly cozy. Bathed in the soft English sun, the landscape genuinely looks like a bright, picturesque Thomas Kinkade-style painting of a historic, peaceful British countryside. Today, the mansion is gone, and the grounds are just a quiet, harmless patch of earth near the church. But honestly, from my perspective, that picture-perfect, natural exterior is exactly what makes the reality of Borley so deeply unsettling. The contrast is just jarring, because while it looks like a serene village retreat by day, the horrifying history baked into that ground refuses to rest. You can be admiring the tranquil trees in the sun, but the moment the light begins to fade, and you find yourself standing near the old line of trees, that suffocating dread rushes right back in. The dark, sorrowful figure of the nun hasn't moved on. She is still searching. Visitors today still report cold spots, phantom footsteps where no one is walking, and the unmistakable, sweet smell of lavender drifting on the wind, just as it did when the house was alive. Borley Rectory proves that the most haunted houses in history don't need walls to keep their secrets. Thanks for joining me on this case here on True Haunt Lore, and I'll catch you in the next mystery.